Go right ahead.
Good morning. Please state and spell your name.
It's William Boswell, William. Last name is Boswell, B-O-S as in Sam, W-E-L-L.
And what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm a special agent with the State of Wisconsin Department of Justice.
Any particular area of expertise?
Yes, within a division of criminal investigation, I'm assigned to the Arson Bureau.
Sure. What are your roles as a special agent with the Arson Bureau?
With the Arson Bureau, we specifically generally investigate fires and explosions believed to be of an intentional nature, an incendiary intentional act.
Showing it's been marked in this case is exhibit number 314. Just what is that?
That is a copy of my curricula vitae.
I move 314 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
Early in your career, how'd you get started in being interested in fire or anything of that sort?
Kind of a longer story, but many, many years ago was a volunteer firefighter. Began my career as a college student in biology and secondary education, and then became enrolled at Oklahoma State University's School of Fire Protection. Was hired as a fire protection consultant with Wausau Insurance Companies in 1994, and then with the Department of Justice in January of 2000 as a special agent.
And I see a badge there. Are you a law enforcement officer?
I am, sir.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about your training or your education in the area of investigating fires or arson.
Certainly. So initially it was with the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Academy, did my 420 or so hours there, and then took various courses prior to that while I was employed with Wausau Insurance and while I was in college in fire investigation with the International Association of Arson Investigators, the Oklahoma chapter of the International Association of Arson Investigators, and then here in Wisconsin. In addition to that, I've taken fire academy courses in fire investigation, various courses in fire death investigation, and I currently teach for the Wisconsin Department of Justice Death Investigation School. I teach fire death investigation and body recovery.
Tell us about the subspecialty of fire death investigations.
So with fire death investigation, my background there is assessing fire scenes. We generally look at fire patterns on walls and on floors and ceilings and things of that nature. When we specifically are dealing with a fire death related event, we're looking for those same types of patterns and making various assessments about things that we see with bodies. Sometimes it's a complete intact body. Sometimes it's a body that's been disarticulated as a result of the fire or fire suppression operations. Sure.
What effect does fire have on the human body?
It can change it dramatically. Heat, when heat is applied to a body, heat will generally cause the skin to tighten and shrink. Wrinkles around the corners of the eyes and the corner of the mouth begin to smooth out somewhat with just the application of heat. But as the body continues to heat within a compartment or a bedroom or wherever it might be, those changes eventually will get down to the destruction of the skin, the fat, the muscle tissue, and can ultimately, if the fire is allowed to continue to burn, down to the destruction of the bone tissue as well. Sure.
You talked a little bit about your experience, your education, and maybe your teaching. As well as teaching, are you one of the people who actually responds to crime scenes?
Yes, sir.
What type of crime scenes are you responding to regularly?
They vary. In addition to the fire-related events that I get called to as an employee of the Department of Justice, my coworkers in the Arson Bureau generally get called out to work officer-involved shootings, homicides that our special assignments folks investigate, and we assist in processing those scenes, sometimes with and sometimes without the assistance of the State Crime Laboratory.
Do you have any estimate as to how many fire scenes you've investigated as in your role in the Department of Justice?
Since January of 2000, if I estimated about 25 per year, over 400 or more as a case agent and additional as an assisting agent with one of the other folks in the Arson Bureau.
And as part of that experience, have you unfortunately had to see the human body in various states of being burned on different occasions?
Yes, sir.
Sometimes partially and sometimes more completely.
That's correct.
Okay. Talk to us generally about fire. What temperature does fire generally burn at? What can you tell us about fire?
Most any fire that you experience generally does not burn beyond about the temperature of around 1,800 degrees.
Sure. Is 1,800 degrees what generally fire burns at? Is that sufficient to incinerate completely the human body into ash?
It generally would not.
Tell me about that.
Generally, you end up needing some additional, if I can use the word, assistance to result in the destruction of human tissue. Even devices that are designed in crematoriums to completely destroy a body often will leave various small fragments of bone, not very often tissue, but small fragments of bone that are left over after that cremation event. So short of adding additional oxygen or maybe changing the fuel to oxygen ratio and how the fire burns, it's very, very difficult to get a complete consumption of human body just from the fire.
When you say insert oxygen, would a small household fan, I suppose there's one sitting right there, something of that size be enough to do what you just mentioned in terms of inserting oxygen if that were applied to perhaps just a residential fire?
It would certainly help. I mean, if by example, if you're lighting a small campfire or something of that nature, or lighting a fire in your own fireplace, you may often, blow on that or or you use a set of bellows or maybe wave your hand to add and move additional air or oxygen across the surface of that fire to increase the effectiveness of that fire.
Sure. In crime scenes you've responded to and in your training and experience where the human body has been burned, are there usually some remains left that you're able to identify or find?
Generally, yes.
And in perhaps the more extreme of those states, what are those remains? What's usually left?
You'll find very small pieces of bone fragment, the more thick or dense pieces of the human skeleton, perhaps kneecaps, the ball joints of hips and shoulders, where the bone is more densely compacted because of just its development. Teeth will oftentimes remain, thicker portions, maybe around the orbits of the eye, maybe portions of the base of the skull.
Are you assisted in your work with the Department of Justice with professionals in other disciplines?
Yes, sir.
And just in general, what professions do you generally work with?
We work with medical examiners, forensic pathologists, and forensic anthropologists on a fairly regular basis when we're dealing with burned and scattered or disarticulated human remains.
In the early part of July or going into mid-July of 2021, were you asked to assist in the investigation of the homicides of Bart and Krista Haldersons out in Windsor?
Yes, I was.
And how did your involvement come to be in that investigation?
Dane County Deputy Greg Leatherberry had contacted another one of my coworkers with the U.S. Department of Justice, Special Agent William Fulton, to assist in coming to look at the residence in Windsor. And specifically at that time, it was directed toward looking at a fireplace that was inside the residence. After they had assessed it, I was on vacation back in Pennsylvania at the time. I was contacted and asked if upon my return to Wisconsin, if I could stop by and also take a look at and assess the fireplace inside the residence.
And did you stop by?
I did, sir.
And did you have an opportunity to thoroughly examine the fireplace, the logs, the newspaper, the ashes, and things of that sort at that fireplace at the Halderson home?
Yes, sir.
All right. And were you aware that photographs were being taken throughout these processes of examining the fireplace and searching the home?
Yes, I was.
I'm showing it's been marked in this case as exhibit number 316 all the way through 340. Can you just page through those? And the question at the end is, do these appear to be photographs of the Halderson fireplace home and areas that were searched by you and others in law enforcement over the course of days you were there? Are
Yes.
those photographs of such?
Yes, those are.
Okay, I'll take those back from you. I'll move 316 all the way through 340 into evidence at this time.
Any objection? No objection.
They are received, and they may be published.
And Special Agent, there's a screen in front of you that's going to come on, but Judge, I'll ask to publish those via slideshow on USB, or the HDMI left. And Agent, what are we looking at there in Exhibit 228?
This is the fireplace that I was asked to come and examine.
Just based on this overall photograph, are there any observations you're able to make based on your training and experience in this area?
In looking at the fireplace insert or the wrap that's around the fireplace, there is an area at the top that is a different color. Appears as if the paint is missing in that area, and that's perhaps bare metal beneath. And it appears as if of the what should be 4 glass inserts in the fireplace, only 3 remain.
We'll go to the next photograph. Enter each time. What are we looking at there?
This appears to be the base of the fireplace or the hearth area with the fireplace insert and the base of the fireplace at the top of the photograph. There are also what appear to be 3 evidence markers placed on the hearth as well.
Around the time that you were there and at other times you were where Deputy Leatherberry was taking swabs and things of that sort around the fireplace?
That's correct.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. What are we looking at there?
That appears to be a pair of gloves.
All right, and that's Exhibit 229? I'll say it's Exhibit 229.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
We'll go to the next one.
Okay.
Tell us about that view.
That again is the front or the facing side of the fireplace with the 3 of 4 panels of glass still in place. It appears in this photograph you can still see portions of the glass at both the top and the bottom of the door frame on the left-hand side.
Okay. Go to the next slide, 231. Is that a closer up view of that area that you were saying you could see the bare metal?
That is correct.
What does this appear to be to you based on your training and experience? What were you observing there?
In looking at this photograph, there are a couple of things. One, if we look toward the middle portion of the photograph on the stone, there is some soot deposition or discoloration to the stone, which would not be uncommon in the area of a wood-burning fireplace inside a home. Beneath that is the insert for the fireplace, and toward the, if you were looking at the top edge, toward the left and the right-hand side, there appears to be a bubbling or some type of change in the texture of the paint on both sides, and in the middle portion, the paint appears to be absent down to the level of the bare metal.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. 232, what did 232 appear to be to you?
232 appears to be the far right-hand pane of the glass doors to the fireplace.
And we'll go to the next slide. 233, is it a closer up of that glass area that you said was broken off?
That's correct, down toward the bottom left door, yes.
We'll go to the next slide, which is 234. And is that door open?
That's correct.
All right, we'll go to the next slide. 235. At some point, you opened up the fireplace, correct?
That's correct.
What types of observations did you personally make based on your training experience once you were able to open up the fireplace and look inside?
Certainly. Just a couple of items in looking around. If we've moved beyond the observations of the fireplace insert with the discoloration and the change in texture of the paint, as we look inside the fireplace, there are a few areas of discoloration on both the left, rear, and right-hand sides of the stonework inside the fireplace. There is a discoloration or a change in coloration, if you will, on the fireplace grate from left to right. And as we got in a little bit further and began to examine things a little more closely, there was almost like a greasy residue on the pull chain on the right-hand side, which controls the fireplace damper at the top of the chimney.
In your profession, why was discoloration noticeable, or why did you even note it in any of your reports?
Certainly, there is when we look at fire scenes in general, we're looking for changes in things in patterns. If we're looking at the overall a particular piece of fuel, let's say, like a couch, we're looking at differences across the surfaces of that couch, considering it's the same piece of fuel from left to right, top to bottom. We're looking at how it burns differently and what it may do differently in the environment. In looking at this photograph of the fireplace grate in particular, we noticed the color change and the gradation between left and right. To me, that indicated that something toward the right-hand side of the fireplace burned differently, was perhaps a different fuel than what was on the opposing side.
All right, and we'll go to the next slide. 236, just a view of that glass again.
That's correct.
All right, next slide, 237. What are we looking at there, and why was that notable?
At the bottom of the fireplace, on the fireplace floor, and what you would find in most solid fuel burning fireplaces or furnaces, you would find a trap door, if you will, or an ash dump door. It's a flat metal door that rotates on a central pin left or right, and in a fireplace that burns wood, to get rid of the ash, you would, to keep your fireplace clean, you would open that up, sweep the ash down in, and it would go into some type of container or area where the ash would be secured until you cleaned it out.
Sure. Is this a common feature in homes?
Yes. In wood-burning fireplaces, yes.
Okay. And the area in which this goes into, is that generally a fire-resistant area? Generally,
it could go into an ash bucket. I can tell you from personal experience growing up, it went to another unused fireplace in the basement of my parents' home. And it just went to the floor in the basement, and there was nothing there to catch it. In some locations, it's an enclosed environment. In other locations, it might go into a metal ash bin or bucket where the ash would be collected and removed.
In the times that it's an enclosed environment and not just a bucket or another fireplace below it, is there usually an access door to allow the homeowner or whoever's keeping the fire to be able to clean that out periodically?
Yes, there should be.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. 238, what are we looking at there, and why was that notable?
This is the right side, lower right-hand side of the fireplace, and again, I believe when Detective Leatherberry took this photograph, it was to document that discoloration of the tines, if you will, on the fireplace grate, as well as the presence of the greasier substance that's on the handle for the pull chain on the right-hand side.
Sure. And this may be a good time to ask this question. Some of these photographs are being taken by others, but were you personally involved in being very close to this area and this fireplace?
Yes, I was. Was
there any sort of scent that made that gave you any impression, or that raised your attention at all?
Yes, there was.
And tell me about that.
When I'll talk about by example first, because it'll be somewhat maybe gruesome toward the end. When in the performance of my normal duties, if we are out conducting a fire death investigation and we're looking to recover human remains inside a structure that may be buried beneath debris, that may be in collapse, whatever it might be, we rely very much on our senses sometimes to get us there. Sometimes it's a sense of sight. Sometimes it is feel. You can sometimes walk over top of human remains that are beneath ash and not know it until you feel a difference in what you're standing on. And sometimes it is smell. And I equate that smell very often because I love to barbecue. It smells like barbecued pork oftentimes, or the grease that you would get from barbecuing a pork shoulder. And this is the smell that I associated with what I was gathering from inside that fireplace when I was down in front of it and working near it.
We'll go to the next slide. Now we're back up on the actual frame itself, but I think it's a closer view in Exhibit 241. Can you tell us why this photograph's relevant and what you're able to glean from that bubbling that we see there?
Certainly. This appears to me to be, if we look at the doors and the break in the seam of the doors, this is probably where the two doors come together in the middle of the fireplace, and what you're seeing on the metallic surface above of the insert is a bubbling or a change in the texture of the paint that is applied, presumably from the manufacturer, but the paint that's applied around the frame of the fireplace.
And based on your training and experience, do you have any comment as to what might cause such bubbling?
Certainly, around a fireplace, the assessment that I think most people would make if they looked at it was that it must have been impacted thermally by some type of heat leaving the fireplace and impacting the metal. Could that also be caused by some type of chemical contact? Absolutely.
Okay. We'll go to the next slide. 242. Now this is the other side of perhaps that area on the top of the frame. What different are you able to glean from this picture? It's labeled as 242, but also with Mr. Leatherberry's sticker as Family L.
Certainly. As we are on the left side of the photo, the far left side of the photo where the two corners of the insert come together, there is no, at least in this photograph, no visible damage or changes in the surface of the paint around the insert. But as we move to the right, your right also, we start to see that the texture of the paint changes and the amount of the paint present continues to change until we're at the far right-hand side of the photograph where we're down to the bare metallic surface of the frame insert.
Okay. And same question here. Do you believe this either could have been affected by heat or some sort of chemical agent?
I would believe that this would be a heat or a thermal-related artifact.
Sure. Now go to the next slide, which is Exhibit 316. At some point, that fireplace grate was removed out.
That's correct.
Okay. And you examined it thoroughly, I would imagine.
Yes.
Okay. Is this that grate?
That is the grate.
That newspaper that we see crumpled up in there, was it important to you to maybe look into the date on that newspaper and what type of newspaper it was?
Yes, we did. We examined each of the pieces of each of the items that were on the grate as we went from top to bottom and got down to where the newspaper was.
And you wrote a report in this matter documenting the type of newspaper, where it was addressed to, and the date and all of that?
That's correct.
And if you need to see that report, you let me know and I'll just bring it to you. But do you recall the dates that newspaper was from?
I don't want to speculate, but late June of 2021, maybe the 23rd, maybe the 27th.
Sure. And if I showed you your report, you'd be able to confirm that?
Absolutely, I would.
All right. Showing your report in this matter, and my thumb is right next to it. Were you right on the 23rd?
I was right on the 23rd.
All right. And what was that addressed to?
It was listed as current resident 4595 Oak Spring Circle, DeForest, Wisconsin, 53532-1743.
And what newspaper was it?
This was the Badgerland Values Dane Zone newspaper.
And that's one of those things they just send to your house. You don't really want them, but they send them to you anyway?
That's correct.
Okay. We'll go to the next slide. 317, is that an overhead view?
Yes, it is.
There's a white area in the middle of that burnt log. Did that at all catch your attention?
Yes, it did.
Why?
When for orientation purposes, I guess for the jury, when you're looking at this photograph, the top left-hand portion of the photograph with the darker tines, as you're facing the fireplace, that would be on your right-hand side. So the back of that fireplace grate is at the bottom of the screen for orientation purposes. But in looking at the burned piece of wood in the center and the white item that is present there at about the 6 o'clock position, before we moved this out of the fireplace, we took a look at it with some better lighting, and based on my training and experience, that appeared to be bone. Okay. Burned bone.
And was that in fact there? You did not place that there, I guess I'll ask.
That is correct. I did not place that there.
And we'll go to the next slide, which I believe is a close-up 318, but that is a photograph prior to anything being disturbed in that area.
That's correct. Okay.
We'll go to 319, which is next. That's what the fireplace looks like without the grate?
That is correct.
And we're able to see a more clear view of the ash trap there?
Yes.
I don't know where everyone's at with fireplaces in their house. A lot of people have the gas one. Could you just explain what that chain does in relation to a fire?
Certainly. So the chain it controls a damper that is on top of the chimney. If you were to go on top of the roof of the residence to where the chimney is, there is a metal plate that is able to be moved up and down by pulling on this chain either down or releasing it up to assist in airflow throughout the chimney, as is the circular item that you see in the back. That is for combustion air or fresh air to come into the back of the fire at the base of the fire from the exterior, and the heat rises and goes out and leaves the structure. So if that chain were pulled completely down, it would close the damper at the top of the fireplace.
Understood. All right, we'll go to the next exhibit, 320, and just a closer view of maybe that ash trap. We'll go to the next one, 321. Again, that became relevant in your investigation, did it not?
That's correct.
That's perhaps why there's quite a few photos. And we'll go through a few of these somewhat quickly, but we'll go to the next one. There we're looking at just another view of that top view of the fire.
That's correct.
Goes without saying, but fair to say that that fire appears to have some fresh logs put on top of it?
Yes.
And one burnt piece in the middle.
That's correct.
All right, we'll go to the next one.
Counsel, we should note for the record what the exhibit numbers are.
Sure. That was 322. Now we're at 323. What are you doing here in taking some of the, or having some of these photographs taken? Do you know the purpose?
Yes, I believe when we took this it was twofold. One, to continue to show the pieces or the items that were on the grate that were unburned, to include the two logs on both the left and the right side, as well as the newspaper. And in the bottom center, running parallel with the fireplace grate, was another piece of wood that ultimately was squared off on one end and kind of rounded over on the end closest to the viewer.
All right, we'll go to the next one, which is 324. We're gonna have a couple close-up photographs of this suspected bone, correct?
Yes.
And this was the bone that you observed on the top of the fireplace?
That's correct. Yes.
All right, we'll go to the next one, 325. Just some different lighting.
Yes.
Go to the next one, 326. And at some point it was placed on a kind of a measuring tool from law enforcement.
Yes.
And the same with 327.
Correct.
All right. At points during your investigation, did it appear necessary to you to call out a forensic anthropologist who specialized in bone?
Absolutely.
And was one brought to the scene, in fact, a doctor?
Yes.
And who was that doctor?
Dr. Christina Figueroa Soto.
Okay.
For the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office.
We'll go to the next one, 328. What is this?
Those are additional, what appeared to be bone fragments that were around the area where the larger piece was that you saw in the prior exhibit.
Okay. 329. Just another one of those fragments?
That's correct.
Okay. And the next couple, we'll go to 330. There was just some zoomed in images of that grate where some of these things were being found, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Same with 331.
Yes.
332.
Yes.
And 333. 333, though, brings us to a different spot in the Halderson home, does it not?
That's correct.
And in fact, we'll go to 334. We have to go to the basement, right?
Yes, the prior photo was the ash dump removed so we could see what was underneath it and what was beneath it.
Right.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Sure.
Ash trap in the fireplace. Where, in fact, did that ash trap lead to in the Halderson home?
It led to an area directly beneath the fireplace. This was a tri-level home. The basement level is below grade. The area where the fireplace was located that you saw in the prior photos was at grade level. There was a kitchen, living room, dining room space, and then a bedroom space. So we're in this photograph, we're at the lowest level of the home, looking at what would have been the back side of the fireplace. And I had mentioned on one of the prior exhibits, the combustion intake, the circular item in the back of the fireplace. The metallic pipe that you see here is what goes directly to the back side of that combustion air intake for the fireplace.
Was there an access in the Halderson home to the container containing the ashes from the ash trap?
Yes, there was.
And was it easily accessible?
No, it was not.
What do you mean by that?
What you see here is after some of the items had already been moved, but so in the basement, the blue table that you see here was covered in other items. I believe I referred to it in my report. There were pieces and parts of what appeared to be an old billiard table that had been stacked up upon the top surface and leaning up against the front of this blue workbench, if you will. The workbench and all the items associated with the billiard table had to be removed, and we then removed the wood paneling that you see on the wall to get to where the ash trap is. And if you look at the bottom right-hand portion of the photo, underneath the table, you'll see a gray colored item there. Immediately to the left of that, that debris that you see on the floor is debris that has fallen out of the door that covered up the ash trap access to the fireplace.
Okay. So what did you do to gain access to this area of the house?
All the items were removed from the workbench. The workbench was removed, and we removed the paneling from the wall. Saw that we had a very, very small opening for access to the ash trap. And knowing that we had to get in here to see what was beneath that fireplace, my coworker, William Fulton from Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms had contacted a colleague of his who specializes in urban search and rescue, shoring up buildings, breaching walls, and things like that to find out what was going to be the safest way to access this for our safety and to prevent any collapse inside the residence.
Okay. And we'll go to the next slide. So what did you do here?
So so for reference, the smallest opening that you see there on the right-hand side where the wall is painted yellow, that was where the ash trap door had been. And it was a very, very small, approximately 8x8 opening that we needed. That's all we had initially to try to get inside of where this was. So the larger openings that you see to the left and the right were openings made in the wall by Special Agent Fulton, based on the recommendation from his urban search and rescue coworker.
Okay. We'll go to the next slide. Just a closer up of what is that?
That is the opening to the left-hand side that we created in the wall with the sledgehammer to be able to access the interior portion that was beneath the fireplace.
And we'll go to the next slide. Closer up, what is that?
That is a similar opening, but now on the right-hand side of the fireplace.
Okay. At that point, after cutting these holes, were you able to access the ash area?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll go to the next slide. What is that?
That is a top-down view from the vantage point of the level just above the basement, looking down through the ash trap into the pit that contained the ashes underneath the fireplace.
All right. And we'll go to the next slide. What is that?
That is a similar view of that area and the ash that was inside the ash pit, if you will, beneath the fireplace.
And the next slide, similar?
Similar, yes, with debris removed.
All right, and the next slide. What are we looking at there?
Same area, a different capture of the area after additional debris was removed from inside.
Okay, and we're going to stop looking at photographs for a second. You mentioned debris removed, so I guess I assume you're removing debris and taking photos along the way?
That's correct.
Tell me about that process.
So I'll talk about the photos first. With the assistance of Dane County Deputy Scott Coons, we attached cameras to the underside of the fireplace. The support floor for the fireplace had iron or steel bars running through it for support. We used magnetic cameras to hold, or magnets to hold the cameras up so that we could view the interior of this to do two things: to A, take photographs along the way, and B, to push those images to his iPad that he had so that in areas, I mean, these holes are about 16 by 16 inches. And I'm a little barrel-chested, and getting inside was a little difficult. So sometimes seeing, we had to rely on what he was transmitting to his iPad so that we could see where we were to gather items. So we had lights that he set up inside, as well as his cameras that assisted us in documenting the process as we removed debris from the upper levels down to the level that you see here.
Sure. And just in general, how did you remove the debris?
So we worked in at different times from each side, but never usually at the same time. We had a fan that was set up on top of the chimney. We removed the damper from the top of the chimney outside and had a fan to draw out dust, to keep dust from getting inside the residence. And we used large grain scoops, plastic handled grain scoops, and removed the items that removed the piles of debris in there to 5-gallon pails, and had those then removed to the exterior of the structure for further examination by Dr. Figueroa Soto and others, as well as the Dane County Bomb Squad with their X-ray machine.
And how long did this whole process take to take out all this ash?
We worked that day for probably 6 hours or so. From the time we got started, we had breached the wall prior to that, and we had several different crews there, sifting crews working outside, as well as the crime lab and the Dane County Bomb Squad. And it was the better portion of a day. We actually, 3 or 4 of us actually ended up having to leave at the end of the day to go to a different fire someplace else, but we finished this up before we took off that day.
Sure. And were you part of the sifting operation after the debris was removed?
A portion of it, yes.
And were things of note being found?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So the sifting operation consisted of a couple of different things. Again, when materials would be brought out before they went to the sifting stations, and we probably had 4 to 6 sifting stations, maybe more. Before those items were sifted, they were X-rayed by the bomb squad, bomb techs, to determine if there were any items in a particular bucket that might be of interest and that somebody should be looking for. Whether it was metallic items, whether they believed it was something that showed up that maybe looked different that you might not see right away with the naked eye. And then those items were sifted. As the items were sifted, if there were questions about what it might be, whether it was bone or whether it was maybe non-organic remains, Dr. Figueroa Soto was there to answer those questions for the sifting crews. And then as we went through 1/2-inch and 1/4-inch screens, the items that were sifted out onto tarps in case we needed to go back through those at a later date, and those items were maintained.
Sure. Did you yourself see any items that appeared to be bone to you?
Yes, I did.
And were those items also examined by Dr. Figueroa Soto from the crime lab, or from the medical examiner's office?
Yes. Yes, they were.
Those items that you observed that appeared to be bone, as well as the items that you observed in the fireplace that you've already said you believe to be bone, were those consistent with what you've observed in your career and your training and experience as a bone or human bone that's subjected to heat or fire?
I could say that they were consistent with bone. I would not be able to make a determination while there if it was human bone or non-human bone.
Do you rely on another expert to make that
I
determination?
do indeed.
And
yes.
who is that expert?
That would be a forensic anthropologist, and in this case, Dr. Figueroa Soto.
And she was in fact on scene, was she not?
She was.
Okay. 1 second.
You bet.
No further questions. Thank you.
Cross-examination.
No, thank you.
May this witness be excused
He may be excused, yes.
and released, or you'll let him know?
We'll let him know.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good remainder of your day.
You do the same. Thank you.